Welcome to the June 6, 2024 Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is 6:01, it's running 1 minute behind. We'll keep things running along. So I've got 3 members present. I won't do a roll call. We got William Scales present, Jonathan Langley present, and Jeff Fleschauer. So first, let's start with citizen comments. This is open for citizens to be heard on any issue or concern. If you'd like to speak on a specific item on the agenda, please wait until the citizen comment period for that item. For all citizen comments, please, 1, fill out a speaker card and hand it to staff. Number 2, come up to the microphone and state your name and address, and limit your comments to 2 minutes. Are there any citizens who would like to speak to the commission at this time? And this is more probably general comment. We'll open public comment for each item that's specific on the agenda here. Any general comments? All right, seeing none, we will move to the minutes. And if you notice me pausing, our microphones have been moved up. I was complaining about this to Amy. They are like right front and center in front of my face. So no one asked me my opinion, but man, it's close. Consideration and approval of the May 2nd, 2024 meeting minutes. Any comments from the board or a motion? Okay, motion for approval made by Board Member Scales. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Fleschauer. All in favor say aye. Aye. Seeing no one opposed, the minutes are approved. Announcements, it looks like, are next.
No announcements.
Okay, we are moving right along then. I was kind of hoping, you had a whole bunch for us. So item 2, it's going to be a variance request to allow more than the maximum number of retaining walls on a site. That's the first variance. The second one is a variance request to allow for a taller than allowable retaining wall within a front yard. And the third one is a variance request to allow for encroachments into areas with slopes of 20% or greater for the property located at 326 Lionheart Way. Staff.
Yes. So, to get everybody up to speed, previously this property was granted 3 variances with conditions for a design of retaining walls. The applicant had to change their plans, which changed the height of the walls and the number of the walls. When the updated variance request was brought to the board in April, it was determined that all variances had expired and that all were needed for the current design. For that reason, the item was deferred in April, and the applicant is now additionally requesting to allow more than 3 retaining walls on the lot and to allow development within 20% slopes or greater, which are the other requests that expired. Okay. I'll now go over the 3 requests. I'll read the criteria in the first request and then only mention the criteria by number in the following 2 requests. Request number 1. Maximum height for front yard retaining walls. Criteria 1, where by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific piece of property at the time of enactment of the zoning ordinance, or by reason of exceptional topographic conditions or other extraordinary and exceptional situation or condition, such a piece of property is not able to accommodate development as required under this ordinance. Staff finds that there are exceptional topographic conditions on this site which require the use of retaining walls to provide effective drainage, access, and support for development. Since the previously approved variance request for a 6 feet maximum front yard retaining wall, conditions of the site have caused the plan to change. In order to prevent a retaining wall from encroaching into the sanitary sewer easement on the property, the proposed house has to be raised by 3 feet from their previous plans, which also increases the necessary height of the retaining wall in the front yard. The Franklin zoning ordinance allows for retaining walls located in the front yard of a residence to be a maximum of 2 feet in height. The applicant is requesting retaining wall heights up to 8 feet in the front yard of the property. Due to the exceptional slopes on the property and the location of the sanitary sewer easement, staff finds this criteria for request 1 to be met. Criteria 2. The strict application of any provision enacted under the zoning ordinance would result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties for or exceptional or undue hardship for the owner of the property. Strict application of the zoning ordinance would create practical difficulties in the development of this site due to the exceptional topographic conditions that exist. Due to the exceptional slope conditions across the site and the location of the sanitary sewer easement, retaining walls higher than 2 feet in the front yard are necessary to support the house and prevent the retaining walls in the backyard from encroaching into the easement. Therefore, staff finds this criteria for request 1 to be met. Criteria 3. Such relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially impairing the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. Allowing for taller retaining walls in the front yard of this site would not be a detriment to the public good, nor would it impair the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance limits the number and height of retaining walls on a residential site to prevent a site from being dominated by retaining walls, which may result in aesthetic concerns for neighboring property owners and the community. The applicant has determined that the front yard retaining walls up to 8 feet are necessary to support the proposed house. The applicant also intends to abide by the condition of the previous approval that was put on the previous request, to have landscaping cover up to the top 2 feet of the wall in the front yard. Staff finds this criteria for request 1 to be met. Request number 2, maximum number of retaining walls. For criteria number 1, the subject property is located within the Avalon subdivision with over 20% slopes across the majority of the property. These exceptional topographic conditions require the use of retaining walls to provide effective drainage, access, and support for development. The Franklin zoning ordinance allows a maximum of 3 retaining walls for a residential lot. The applicant is requesting a total of 4 retaining walls. The applicant has determined that this is the minimum number of retaining walls required to develop a single-family home on this lot. Due to the exceptional slope conditions across the site, staff finds criteria 1 for request 2 to be met. For criteria 2, strict application of the zoning ordinance would create practical difficulties in the development of this site due to exceptional topographic conditions that exist. Due to the exceptional slope conditions across the site, more than 3 retaining walls are needed to support the development of this site. Staff finds criteria 2 for request 2 to be met. For criteria 3, allowing for additional retaining walls on this site would not be a detriment to the public good, nor would it impair the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance limits the number of retaining walls on a residential site in order to prevent a site from being dominated by retaining walls, which may result in aesthetic concerns for neighboring property owners and the community. Because several neighboring lots within the Avalon subdivision have also had to implement unique retaining walls, this development would not contradict the aesthetic qualities of the neighborhood. In addition, the applicant has determined that 4 retaining walls is the minimum number necessary for development on the lot. Therefore, there would not be an excess of retaining walls dominating the site. Staff finds that criteria 3 for request 2 to be met. Request number 3, encroachments into areas with slopes of 20% or greater. For criteria 1, the slopes existing on this lot present an exceptional situation for development of this property. Given the topography of the site, encroachment into 20% slopes is necessary for development. However, the Franklin zoning ordinance does not allow for encroachment into areas with 20% slopes or greater. Staff recognizes this exceptional slope conditions across the site and believes that encroachment into the areas of 20% is necessary in this case. For these reasons, staff finds that criteria 1 for request 3 to be met. For criteria 2, due to the exceptional topographic conditions, the strict application of the zoning ordinance would create practical difficulties in the development of this site. As shown in the attached exhibits, slopes greater than 20% cover most of the lot. It would not be feasible to build a house on the portion of the lot that does not have slopes greater than 20%. Given the unique topography of the site, the strict application of the zoning ordinance would prevent development on this site. For these reasons, staff finds that criteria 2 for request 3 to be met. For criteria 3, allowing for the encroachment into areas with slopes of 20% or greater on this site would not be a detriment to the public good, nor would it impair the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. The lot is currently neighbored by lots with similar topography that have utilized similar site grading techniques. The intent of the zoning ordinance is to allow a single-family residential home on this lot, and this variance is the minimum necessary deviation from the requirements of the zoning ordinance in order to develop a single-family home on the lot, given the current conditions of the site. Staff finds that criteria 3 for request 3 to be met. Staff recommendation. Staff recommends to the Board of Zoning Appeals to move to approve the variance request to allow for a taller than allowable retaining wall within the front yard, and the variance request to allow more than the maximum number of retaining walls on a site, and the variance request to allow for encroachments into areas with slopes of 20% or greater for the property located at 326 Lionheart Way, because the criteria for granting a variance have been met. I'm happy to answer any questions.
May have questions in a couple minutes. I'm kind of going through this. We've got a lot going on. Is the applicant present? Do you have any additional comments or explanations of kind of what?
Well, to be honest, she knows more about it than I do. I actually run the electrical division, but my boss, who's also the homeowner, is in Baltimore on a wedding, so
Okay.
I'm here on his behalf. He gave me a little bit of a rundown, which is nowhere near as detailed as what she just did.
I'll tell you, if you can step forward for us and just state your name for the record. We take minutes, so it'll help our staff out.
My name is Devin Decker with Aurora Building Company.
Okay, perfect. Now you're famous, so it's excellent.
All right.
All right. And you're welcome to sit down. If you want to take a seat like that first chair, I think we'll probably have some questions. You may not be able to answer them, but that way you won't have to wear your feet out up there hanging around. So next we will open the public comment. Are there any citizen comments? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to close the public comment?
Motion to close.
Motion made by Board Member Fleschauer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Scales. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, public comment is closed. I think I understand the requests. I know there's a quick summary in here about so we deferred this item in April. I think a couple other variance requests expired, so now we're looking at all three that originally came before us, but more than a year ago. I think the main thing I want to understand is, and the applicant may be able to help us out with this, or staff, I do see in here, I can see chaos coming, so I'm going to go ahead and ask these questions. We had conditions of approval for the last variance request more than a year ago. So two of those conditions were maximum number of retaining walls is 7. So that's number one, and that's in the staff report. Second is the front yard retaining wall, maximum is 6 feet, and the homeowner must provide landscaping so that a maximum of 2 feet of the front yard retaining wall is visible. And Amy mentioned that too in her presentation. I just want to make sure that, I think in the staff recommendation for approval, I don't see those mentioned, so just wanted to make sure. I think one, like how that impacts what the current proposal is, and then making sure us as a board, we don't kind of totally disregard that section of the staff report in there. So I don't know if you can help us there or not. Maybe the applicant is it the exact same request, do we know, where those conditions might apply? Or have we done like a complete site redesign where placement of retaining walls is totally different?
Oh, I think I can pull up the plans. It doesn't seem like it's that much different. From what I understand, there's a sewer easement in the back that when they began to dive a little further into building the walls or planning for the walls, it was recognized that the wall was in that easement. So in order to get out of the easement, they essentially raised the site 3 feet. By doing that, they lost the need to have a retaining wall in the back in that section. But as you can imagine, by the dirt going up in the front, the wall got taller. It did reduce the number of retaining walls needed. It's just that there's one on the front that is now taller than before.
Okay. Can the applicant answer that question for us? If the maximum number of retaining walls is 7, if that's what we're going to cap it out as a board, would that still, I guess, apply to the site? Would that create issues? I guess if we kind of go back to the prior approval, do you know that for us?
Yeah, that'll be enough.
Okay.
You won't need to ask for more.
I think I saw 4 in the staff report. It said minimum of 4, but I didn't know what the max in on that was. And it may have been, y'all may have meant maximum of 4.
It's my understanding that they have 4 on the design.
Okay.
Is that correct? You know?
I think there's 3 in the back, and then there's 2 in the front. One of them is just around a circular porch.
Okay. I'll stop hogging the mic and I'll let other board members ask questions if you have any questions.
My question was around retaining walls. I was unsure whether it was a maximum of 4 or up to 7. But it sounds like up to 7 would give you what you needed. But it sounds like there's only between 4 and 5 based on the numbers you just gave us.
That is my understanding,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. And then my understanding is also that the applicant has no objection to maintaining 2 feet visibility of the brick in the front. Is that accurate?
Correct. He's gonna do landscaping, something that's at least 6 foot tall.
I think with 3 requests, they're all related. We can take these as one item, one vote, or split those. I'm open to whatever kind of board member. If you feel you can make a motion to capture all 3, we can handle that either way, whatever you think.
Okay, I'll make a motion. Give me 1 sec. So, I move to approve the variance request to allow for a taller than allowable retaining wall within the front yard. Move to approve the variance request to allow more than a maximum of retaining walls on the site up to, with the condition of up to a maximum of 7 retaining walls. And I move to approve the variance request to allow for encroachments to areas with slopes of 20% or greater. One condition I left out is with respect to the front retaining walls, that the condition is no more than 2 feet to be exposed, as we discussed, because all the criteria have been met.
Okay. Did we cover the last variance request in that motion? Trying to capture everything to make sure.
I believe I did, but I can.
Okay,
I believe I heard it too, that
Okay, that's good.
the 20% slopes,
okay.
and then he went back to the landscaping one at the beginning.
Okay, so I'll repeat it, and then that way, if
Yes.
staff missed anything, let us know. But, so we have a motion for approval by Board Member Skills for all 3 variance requests with those 2 conditions added that, did you get those, staff? Okay, so we have a motion for approval with conditions. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Fleischauer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, seeing none, this variance is approved. The 3 variance requests are approved with conditions. Thank you, Mr. Electrician. Have a great night. All right. It's always fun when we have multiple requests with similar items. So next is item number 3. It's going to be a variance request to allow for a retaining wall. We're back to retaining walls to be,
No, that's the 3rd one. Or the 4th one, I guess.
Shoot, you should have substantial
Number 2 is the
improvement.
historic zoning one.
You're right,
did we flip-flop these or?
Yeah, she
Okay.
did. I apologize.
No, you're good. So on the, let me go back to the agenda. I'm working off my,
She did it on purpose. She's not here.
That's right.
yeah.
Throwing
she's-
us a wrench.
She sent me an email this, but I'm just following my script here. I'm not a full-time actor, so.
I have it in front of me as well. She had 3 and 4 flip-flopped, so if
Okay.
you wanted to go
So,
to
yep, we are good
substantial
now.
improvement.
Just kidding on that one. We are moving to substantial improvements. So once I find that item in this packet, we will continue on. I'll go ahead and read the caption anyway. So it's a variance request to waive the substantial improvement requirement to floodproof or raise the first floor elevation of a historic structure above the base flood elevation for the property located at 94 to 98 East Main Street. Staff.
Yes, thank you. In terms of background, this .42 acre property is located at 94 and 98 East Main Street. It is zoned First Avenue District and is within the Historic Preservation Overlay, the Central Franklin Overlay, the Flood Fringe Overlay, and the Floodway Overlay. The owner has proposed substantial renovations to the existing building, which require compliance with the zoning ordinance section 17.6.4. This property was on the agenda for the May 2024 Historic Zoning Commission meeting, and planning staff presented the following information on this property. The buildings located on this site and the proposal to designate them as historic buildings has come before the Design Review Committee to discuss their historic form and the history of a service station on the property. The application includes documentation providing that the building on this site has historically been a service station for vehicles since the late 1950s, with the addition of 2 adjoining buildings closest to the Harpeth River, estimated to have been constructed in the 1970s. While these buildings are not a part of the National Register District, they are considered a part of the local historic district, and the DRC has been supportive of considering these buildings as historic resources. The zoning ordinance requires an entire building to come into compliance with the floodplain regulations when the amount of the proposed investment into the building triggers substantial improvement value. This includes a requirement for commercial buildings to raise the finished floor elevation to at least 3 feet above the base flood elevation. The application includes several renderings of how the building would appear with it being raised 2.2 feet to be in compliance with the zoning ordinance. The guidelines do not comment on the raising elevation of the historic structures and only comment on foundation height compatibility as related to infill construction. The foundation height required without the issuance of a variance would also require a significant change to the circa mid-1900 buildings. This change would significantly alter the character-defining features of these historic buildings and therefore compromise its historic status. The proposal to maintain the finished floor elevation as it exists currently is more sensitive to the architectural qualities of the historic structure, presents the least amount of adverse impact to the historic structure, and presents the least amount of adverse impact to the context of its overall historic district. Variances may be issued for the repair and rehabilitation of historic structures upon determination that the proposed work would not preclude its continued designation as a historic structure, and the variance is the minimum necessary deviation from the requirements of the zoning ordinance in order to preserve the historic character and design of the structure. It is recommended that variance requests for historic structures in the floodplain receive a recommendation by the Historic Zoning Commission prior to the consideration of the Board of Zoning Appeals. The Historic Zoning Commission provided a favorable recommendation to the BZA at its May 2024 meeting for the building to remain at its existing first floor elevation, as the proposal is the most sensitive to the architectural qualities of the contributing structure and presents the least amount of adverse impact to the contributing status of the historic structure and the context of the overall historic district. For staff analysis, variances may be issued only upon the determination that the variance is the minimum relief necessary, considering the flood hazard and the factors listed in paragraph 17.6.5a. Variances shall be issued upon 3 factors, including a showing of good and sufficient cause. Because this property is within the local historic district, the Historic Zoning Commission has been supportive of considering these buildings as historic structures. The need to take measures to maintain this status amount to good and sufficient cause for granting variance. The proposal is the most sensitive to the architectural qualities of the contributing structure and presents the least amount of adverse impact to the historic structure in the context of the overall historic district. The Historic Zoning Commission provided a favorable recommendation to the BZA for these reasons. Staff finds that this criteria is met. Factor number 2 is a determination that failure to grant the variance would result in exceptional hardship. The proposal is to keep the historic building at its existing level and not flood-proof the building in order to maintain the historic character of the buildings. The Historic Zoning Commission determined that raising it to meet the base flood elevation would affect the historic character of the buildings. As outlined in the justification letter exhibit, the applicant has determined that the required flood-proofing methods would also affect the historic character of the buildings. Flood-proofing the building would require alterations to the interior and exterior of the buildings that would detract from their historic character. Altering the historic character of the buildings would amount to exceptional hardship for the owners of the property. For these reasons, staff find that this criteria is met. Factor 3 is a determination that the granting of a variance would not result in increased flood heights, additional threats to public safety, extraordinary public expense, create nuisance, cause fraud on, or victimization of the public, or conflict with the existing local laws or ordinances. The Historic Zoning Commission has recommended approval of the variance request to maintain the current elevation of the buildings in order to protect the historic character of the buildings, which contributes to the historic significance of Franklin. Based on the recommendation of Historic Zoning, along with analysis of exhibits provided by the applicant, staff finds that granting the variance would not result in any of the outcomes listed above. Staff finds the 3rd criteria is met. Staff recommendation. Staff recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals move to approve the variance request to waive the substantial improvement requirement to floodproof or raise the first floor elevation of a historic structure above the base flood elevation for the property located at 94 and 98 East Main Street because the criteria for granting a variance has been met. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Is the applicant present for this item? You can step forward for us and state your name and then add any additional comments.
Good evening. My name is Mark Kozewski. I'm here on behalf of the landlords. I work for MJM Architects. At this time, we don't have any additional comments, but I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Are there any citizen comments? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to close the public comment?
Motion to close.
Motion for approval to close the public comment made by Board Member Fleschauer. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Board Member Scales. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, public comment's closed. Questions at all from the board?
I do. Can you tell me the changes that are necessitating this request?
The changes that would be required? or-
What you're trying to do with the property?
Oh, so for the property itself, so the incoming tenants are mostly trying to involve with the interior of the building and some screening for RTUs and things like that. They're trying to keep the historic character of the building, so that's why we're trying to stay away from the fronts and sides of the building.
Any additional questions? Did I answer your question?
It does.
Okay. I'm ready to entertain a motion if you guys are ready.
Yeah, no, I recommend that we move to approve the variance request to waive the substantial improvement requirement to floodproof or raise the first floor elevation of the historic structure above the base flood elevation for the property located at 9498 East Main Street because the criteria for granting this variance has been met.
Okay, motion for approval made by Board Member Fleschauer. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Board Member Scales. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, didn't see anyone opposed, so this variance request is approved. All right, we'll work backwards now. So I jumped the gun. Variance request number 4 is a variance request to allow for a retaining wall to be located a minimum of 1 inch from the rear property lines and 0 inches from the side property lines, and a variance request to allow for a taller than allowable retaining wall within a rear yard for the properties located at 1275 Habersham Way and 1277 Habersham Way. Staff?
Here we go again. Okay. Sure. Sorry about that. Thought I was too close. Is that better? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Before I go through the staff report, I'd just like to point out that there were 3 citizen comments sent in to the planning department, and those are attached to the agenda, but they will not be read aloud. In terms of background, this application and proposal involves both 1275 Habersham Way and 1277 Habersham Way. Both properties are .21 acres and are zoned PD Plan District. The property owners have been in collaboration to propose a retaining wall that extends along the rear lot lines on both properties with a break in the middle of the wall for stairs in order to access the bottom of the wall. As outlined in the applicant's justification letter, the intent of the retaining wall is to prevent further erosion to support an existing rock wall that is starting to fall apart on 1277 Habersham Way and to alleviate the steep slopes in the backyards. In addition to the setback requirements for retaining walls in the zoning ordinance, there is a 10-foot public utility and drainage easement along the rear lot lines. A variance request cannot be requested to allow the retaining wall in the PUDE, so the homeowners have worked with our engineering department to create plans that would theoretically allow the retaining wall to be in the 10-foot PUDE. Staff would like to note that if the variance is approved, the proposed plans would also need approval for the retaining wall to be built in the PUDE. Staff analysis. Request number 1, to allow for a retaining wall to be located a minimum of 1 inch from the rear property lines and 0 inches from the side property lines. Criteria 1. where by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific piece of property at the time of enactment of the zoning ordinance, or by reason of exceptional topographic conditions or other extraordinary and exceptional situation or condition, such a piece of property is not able to accommodate development as required under this ordinance. The slopes in the backyard create a unique situation across both properties. The land in the backyard slopes from the back of the house down to the rear property line. Building the retaining wall in compliance with the setback requirements would require the retaining wall to be built on the sloped portion of the yard, which would likely be impractical to build. Considering the steep slope and the limited space in the backyard, the excavation required for the backfill and slope stabilization would likely reach the decks on both homes and the foundation of 1275 Habersham Way. Additionally, the applicant has stated that the portion of the retaining wall along the side yard lot line would conflict with the existing HVAC pad at 1275 Habersham Way if it were to comply with the setback requirement. The unique topographic condition, along with the limited space in the backyard to accommodate the retaining wall, creates difficulty in accommodating development in accordance with the zoning ordinance. Staff finds that this criteria is met. Criteria 2, the strict application of any provision enacted under the zoning ordinance would result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties for or exceptional or undue hardship for the owner of the property. According to the zoning ordinance regulations, the 8.5-foot retaining wall is required to be at least 8.5 feet from the side and rear property lines. As stated above, placing the wall at least 8.5 feet from the rear property line would mean the wall would be built in the steep slopes, which would likely cause practical difficulties. The excavation required for the backfill and slope stabilization would likely reach the decks of both homes and the foundation of 1275 Habersham Way. Additionally, the applicant has stated that a portion of the retaining wall along the side yard lot line would conflict with the existing HVAC pad at 1275 Habersham Way if it were to comply with the setback requirement. Considering the practical difficulties that would result from complying with the zoning ordinance regulations, staff finds this criteria is met. Criteria 3. Such relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially impairing the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. Staff finds that this request could be a detriment to the neighboring properties and does not meet the intent of the zoning ordinance. Part of the intent of the zoning ordinance regulations is to ensure that if a wall were to crumble or fall, it would not have a negative impact on the neighboring property. The zoning ordinance regulation implements this intent by ensuring that the distance between a retaining wall and the side or rear property line is at least equal to the height of the wall. While the unique design of the retaining wall addresses stormwater runoff concerns, it is still an 8.5-foot retaining wall proposed to be a minimum of 1 inch from the rear property line. If the wall were to crumble or fall, it would all crumble and fall onto the neighboring properties. Additionally, the stairs at the shared property line between the properties function primarily to access and perform any necessary maintenance on the wall. But the wall is possibly going to be 1 inch from the property line. Because of the minimal distance between the wall and the property line, the owners of the wall would have to be on the neighboring property to access or maintain the wall. Lastly, the required plantings at the base of the wall could not be planted on the same property as the wall. Staff finds that criteria 3 is not met. Request number 2, to allow for a taller than allowable retaining wall within the rear yard. For criteria 1, the slopes in the backyard create a unique situation across both lots. In order to alleviate the slopes in the backyard, the retaining wall would need to be taller than the required 6 feet. Staff finds this criteria is met. For criteria 2, if the retaining wall were a maximum of 6 feet, the slopes in the backyard would not alleviate the slopes as much as the applicant needs in order to maintain the yard. This would be a practical difficulty for the property owners, as it would not allow them to fully address the issues that the slopes present for the owners. Staff finds the criteria is met. For criteria 3, staff finds that this request could be a detriment to the neighboring properties, and does not meet the intent of the zoning ordinance. Part of the intent of the zoning ordinance regulation in relation to the retaining wall setbacks is to ensure that if a wall were to crumble and fall, it would not have a negative impact on the neighboring properties. The zoning ordinance regulation implements this intent by ensuring that the height of the walls is not greater than the distance between the retaining wall and the side or rear property lines. While the unique design of the retaining wall addresses stormwater runoff concerns, it is still 8.5 feet tall, proposed to be a minimum of 1 inch from the rear property line. If the wall were, I'm just said that, I'm sorry. Additionally, the part of the intent in this case is for aesthetic concerns to the neighboring properties. Putting an 8.5 foot tall retaining wall 1 inch from the property line would likely present aesthetic concerns for the neighboring properties. Staff finds this criteria is not met. So the recommended motion, staff recommends the Board of Zoning Appeals move to deny the variance request to allow for a retaining wall to be located a minimum of 1 inch from the rear property line and 0 inches from the side property lines, and deny a variance request to allow for a taller than allowable retaining wall within the rear yard of the properties located at 1275 Habersham Way and 1277 Habersham Way, because their criteria for granting a variance have not been met.
Thank you, staff. Is the applicant present for this item? If you could step forward for us and state your name for the record and add any additional comments. I think your staff, not staff, but the board has a copy of your justification letter. If you could hit on some of those items, I think that may help us out as a board, just justification, kind of what's happening on the site.
Yes, sir. Glad to. My name is Andrew Becken. I live at 1275 Habersham with my gorgeous wife, the blonde, in the back row. And our neighbors, Scott and Michelle Bowen, live next to us in 1277. What the issue that we're facing is when these homes were constructed or when the lots were built, there was a very steep slope that runs across the back of the lots. And over time, erosion has eroded the yard, and it's starting to adversely affect our HVAC pad, as Amy mentioned. It's sloping away from the house, it's falling and tilting. It's about a 5% degree slope already where it used to be flat. The backyards are not only steep, which is dangerous while trying to maintain the yards, like cutting grass or just going up and down. But then the erosion that, the stormwater that enters on the Bowens property, which comes upstream from their neighbors and so on, goes across their yard. And then there's a rock wall that extends up the side of one of our backdoor neighbors' lots and extends into the Bowens property. Well, that rock wall extends across that drainage easement. So as the water comes over or comes down the drainage swale, it is washed over and around that rock wall, which is now causing it to crumble and fall. So we've got a few issues. We've got the erosion, we've got the dangerous condition of the steepness of the slope, which exceeds 20%. And the adverse effect of those is that it's starting to erode the hill, which eventually is going to reach our foundations. And obviously, if that happens, that'll be a significant cost impact to both us and the Bowens.
I'll ask a question. This may help us too. So on the, I guess, the proposed wall, as far as drainage, like how would that change drainage on the site? I know there's at least one citizen comment that we received, I think an email that mentions drainage concerns. So just wanted to see if you could help us understand that as well.
Yes, sir, glad to. So again, if you can imagine, the 10-foot drainage easement is basically a drainage ditch that runs down not only both of our properties, but then above the rock wall to the south, that drainage ditch extends up. So all the storm water that either falls on the roofs and out through the gutter systems or in the backyards goes to that ditch, and it comes down I'm sorry, repeat your question.
Yeah, really just trying to understand. So once I think one concern in the citizen comments was just where is the water
Yeah,
going?
you're right.
And
Yes.
thinking through, in my mind, I'm just thinking through, all right, so we have a proposed new wall. Just really simplistically, how does that change the stormwater drainage on the site from what it is currently?
Right, yeah, thank you for clarifying.
No-
So
no
the
worries.
design, the engineer that we hired put a design together. He did a topographic study and a stormwater study of everything upstream, and then designed this piping system to collect all that water and pipe it through behind the wall and then exit downstream of property so that it would be past both of our backdoor neighbors. And there's going to be a catch basin kind of above or near the end of that rock wall, which will collect all that water kind of in that the drainage ditch that's there, collect it, take it down through a piping system, down behind the wall, and then exit at the bottom of the wall.
And he's assured you that that piping system is going to accommodate the amount of water that's, I mean, what they said here is it's a waterfall.
Yes, well, he's a professional engineer.
Who
so,
is it?
We'll help you out. We've got the plans here, so I can,
Yeah, he's with Southern Consulting. He's done a good bit of work.
Trent Smith?
Yeah, Trent Smith, thank you. Yeah. So he's designed the pipe, so I have to trust his ability to.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
He knows his stuff.
Yeah, and I'm a civil engineer by degree, so
Are you?
I kind of reviewed his plans and talked to him and discussed kind of the solution and what the issues we were facing, similar to what I've described here. So he and I don't want to say we collaborated, but I definitely gave my input, and he incorporated that input into his design.
So what's going to happen stormwater-wise to the property on the low side of the wall?
It'll actually end up being better, because what's happened is that rock wall has deteriorated and crumbled. It's fallen, and it's fallen in. If you can imagine two levels of that drainage ditch, right? One above the wall and then one below it where the wall starts. Well, some of that rock on the wall has deteriorated and started falling down the hill, and it's kind of that, along with the dirt that's eroded, has kind of filled in that drainage ditch. And I think it was last week when we had a real big heavy rain, the water actually came down around the rock wall and washed into our back door neighbor's yard, basically covering their entire backyard, like with an inch or two of water. So the wall that we're proposing is, if you can then also imagine like in a 3D plane, we're going to extend that drainage ditch and collect it, but it's going to be in that piping system. So it should actually greatly reduce the amount of water, if not eliminate the water that gets onto the backdoor neighbors' properties.
So in your opinion, if this wall was to be built, would it impede any of your neighbors in any way in a negative manner? Or not impede them, but affect them in a negative manner, in your opinion?
Well, to that point, part of the reason we put the steps in, it's going to be an additional cost to put steps in the wall, but we're really good friends with both of our backdoor neighbors. Our dogs play together. They come up, we go down. So we wanted to put the steps so that we would have access up and down. They could come up, et cetera. So in the sense of impeding, no, they shouldn't. I can't think of any.
Has Trent said anything? Did he have any concern at all that you recall?
He did not express any concern whatsoever.
Good.
okay. I think I'll probably have another question. We got citizen comments next, so let's go ahead and move to the citizen comments, and then I may ask my question for you in a second. So. All right, so we'll open the public comment. Are there any citizen comments on this item? Yeah, don't be embarrassed.
We want to hear from you.
My name is Ted Martinez, 1128 Waverly Place. We back up next to these houses. First thing I do want to say is we've lived here in Franklin for the last 18 years. Really enjoy the way the city is growing and evolving, and commend you for all your work. Our bottom line concern is, of course, our home value, the unintended consequences of all the water, of what could happen. I have zero knowledge of engineering and construction, and trust my friend and his diligence in how he's looking at this and looking at the big picture. I think the substantive comment that I have is I want to make sure my home value does not decrease. I understand that one thing that could impact it is the deterioration of my neighboring house. If that continues to crumble and the erosion and those things, the wall, not excited about it. But
Are you a neighbor?
I'm sorry?
Are you a neighbor or are you
Yeah,
behind?
so my backyard is right behind their backyard. So I have
Okay, so
my
you're
door,
the low
my
side.
backyard, their hill, their house.
Got you. All right.
So
Can you tell me more about this current crumbling rock wall?
that's more along Dave's. So, but what I will say is I have the best dog in Franklin. His name is Apollo. And whenever it rains really, really hard, there's a river. I mean, it's a ton of water. He loves going and playing in that drain, in that river, but the volume of water is pretty immense, and I understand how it's eroding all of these things. Okay?
I guess I'll ask this question out because we've got citizen comments. I'm not sure kind of whether they came from citizens here tonight, but do you have concerns about the proposal at all that would kind of help the board out? Are there specific items that?
Concerns is, when I bought the house, I didn't want a big old wall. I like the open area. Elements have changed. Erosion is happening. I'm a little angry at the construction of it. Learning a little bit about how the house was constructed and where this is today, I'm pretty disappointed in that part. And
Disappointed that there potentially would be a wall in your backyard?
disappointed that the initial construction did not take into account
Oh, I see. Yes,
this issue. And my understanding is when they built comparable homes with similar topography, they accounted for that.
They do now. They
Yeah,
do now.
yeah, and-
Developers back then got away with whatever they could get away with.
Yeah, yeah.
And you said the erosion is significant from your personal observations?
Yeah, you look at the back of their house and their downspouts, instead of being flush with the ground, are now inches.
Suspended.
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad, and so yeah.
So somehow that has to be stabilized, or they're going to lose their backyard.
I will defer to whatever was written there.
Right. Well, these new walls that they're building now, they actually look quite a bit better than, I mean, you may want to take a look at that and see, these segmented block walls actually they look pretty good.
Yeah,
And it wouldn't be as much of an eyesore in your backyard as you think. I'm just going on record as saying they actually look pretty decent, and in fact, you might be able to utilize it to your benefit
okay,
instead of,
sure.
you know.
Okay. Any other questions for me?
I don't think so. Appreciate it.
Cool.
Thank you. If you can state your name for us, that'll help us on the minute taking. So,
David Oberstadt.
okay.
And you had asked the question about the rock wall. So
Yes.
I'm at 1126 Waverly Place. I'm directly behind the Bowens.
Okay.
So
Did you submit the photograph?
I'm the one with the photographs.
Okay.
And did you guys see the video as well? Because there was, okay. But it took video just to show the amount of water that does come down that hill. It's pretty significant. And again, I commend the Bowens because they'll be taking on that water, which would be fantastic. It is a lot of water that comes down from the top of Habersham Way down between our yards. I mean, it literally is a waterfall. I mean, you've seen it. But the photos that I had kind of show that Sunday, the 25th of May. So if the wall is going to be put up, that drain is going to be carrying a lot of water through it. And I guess my concern is just, what if the drain doesn't carry the water?
Right.
It's
If-
coming
if-
over the
if-
wall.
If the water's more excessive than the
Right.
drain can handle, where's it going?
Right.
Is
And I
it
know where
coming
it's going.
down over the wall? Where's it going? You tell me.
I know where it's going. It's
Where's
going
it?
right into 1126 Waverly Place's backyard.
Okay? So it's gonna trickle down the wall, the face of the wall, and run adjacent to the bottom of the wall, just like it does now?
It could potentially do that, yeah. I think it could. Now, again, I'm not against the proposal that they have. I think the wall probably is needed. I agree with the aesthetics.
Has to do, he's gonna have to do something, or he's gonna lose his backyard.
Right.
It's
Absolutely.
gonna be in your backyard, or whoever's behind it.
Absolutely. So just the concern I think that we have is just, will it trap the water and will it
Yeah.
drain it in a
That's
way
the
that
biggest
it-
concern, is will it handle the water flow?
Yep.
Because water actually is what makes the walls fail.
Yep,
So
yep. Agreed.
that's where you have to rely on the engineer.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay.
Any additional comments?
The only other comment was just the location of where that wall would be built. Again, I understand it's a minimum of 1 inch. I know they're going to put it into that 10-foot drainage area. The concern I have, not only for us, but for them, is whether if water does somehow not work through the drainage system, does that erode the foundation of the wall? it's a concern. And I think the comments also stated that the wall could fall over, and if it does, potentially could go.
The walls are put up with grid. If it's an 8.5-foot wall, the grid length on the wall will be at least 8.5 or 12 feet behind it. And it's locked in with gravel. So the wall is most likely not going to fail. What's going to happen is it's going to erode on top and below. And then at that point, if you don't repair it as it erodes, then you might actually have a problem.
Right.
Where the wall may fail at one section or another, depending on, it's all because of the water.
Right.
So if you don't address the water and get the water going away from it, then you could potentially have a problem. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you won't.
Yeah, no, agreed. And like I said, I commend the Bowens. They're taking on a lot of water potentially. There is a lot that comes down from that hill that goes through that easement between all of our yards.
The question is, what other options you all as neighbors have? I mean, if you don't want the wall, what are you going to do?
Oh, we'll sell.
Yeah, we'll sell.
Yeah.
That's probably the other option. I mean, I'm trying to be devil's advocate. I want to.
Aesthetically, I'm fine with the way the wall is going to look. I
Yeah.
don't have an issue with that.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think the hill and everything that they've got, trying to grow grass, maintain it, I think the wall aesthetically will look fine.
Yeah. The key, in my opinion, would be to make sure you handle the water.
Yep, that's correct.
Any additional comments?
I'm good.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. If you'd step forward for us and then state your name as well.
My name is Melissa Oberstadt. I live behind, I live at 1126 Waverly, so we're behind the Bowens as well. My husband just spoke. And we totally support them. They're really good friends of ours, and we don't want them to lose their house. My other concern, what I want to state is if the water does come over, I don't know if there's going to be, like, the wall's going to be built higher than the dirt, because when they built the house next door to us, they had to put a French drain in because it could not hold the water, and we had 3 inches of clay mud in our backyard, about 3 feet wide. And so we've already went through this and had to almost get a lawyer. On the other side, had to put in sidewalk and have the drainage come out of our yard and a French drain about 15 years ago.
Right.
Because
Is that still working?
it's still working, but it was our expense.
Right.
And I don't want now that we have a wall, that's my concern. I love them, but my concern is, I don't know how much further, like, are they gonna have the brick a couple feet higher or a foot higher than where the dirt will be? Because if they have grass right up to it even, or, not just a couple
What
inches.
does the engineered drawing show?
Yeah, there's the finished grade will go to about the mid-height of the top course of the block, but then there'll be another cap block on top of that, so there'll be at least a foot of wall that will stop the water.
Okay, that was my main concern, because I just
the
don't want
blocks
3
are-
inches of
right,
mud in my
right, so
backyard
it'd be
again.
6, 8, it'd be 8 inches.
Okay, thank you.
I think it may be the last page, Amy. I think it's like an illustration of what the wall would look like, maybe the step part, but it's probably not like exact kind of what it's going to.
Isn't it that upper right design?
I think you're on it.
Right there? You see my cursor?
Yeah.
So dirt would slope right down to the cap of it and not stick up above? No?
That's different than what I talked to Trent about, just for that very reason. We didn't want it just to, if it's gonna run across the surface, we didn't want it just to tumble over the wall. Because if you have water running down the wall, it can undermine the foundation.
Absolutely.
So that was my big concern with that. So that's, I don't know if that's a standard detail.
Well, the back of those block are open. They're not finished. So, you have to be careful exposing the back of one of the courses of the block, and the cap block's about 2 inches. So,
Could you advance that next slide? Does that top right one show something that might be helpful?
I did see on that picture we were looking at, it's got kind of typical, so I'm guessing that's copy and paste of
Yeah.
standard kind of.
Is that what you were thinking about right there, sir?
Well, this is just showing, it's labeled pipe penetration through the wall, so I'm guessing this is more at the bottom? Because this is the drainage pipe?
This is a little more accurate, but in the sense that the grass level is shown at the top of the cap. I specifically-
Sir, can you come back to the mic? I'm sorry, or you see the note from our communications.
Thank you, Robert.
Thanks, Robert.
Yeah, I had specifically talked to Mr. Smith about having the wall higher than the grass. One, for safety aspect, two, for cutting the grass so that, the lawnmower doesn't run over the wall. But most importantly is to make sure that if there's any surface water, it's contained by that top course and the cap block.
Does he have you creating a swale back on your property away from the wall to collect the water away from the wall?
He does, and additionally, he has inlets. I think they're,
I saw a couple inlets coming through, so he's grabbing that water and he's gonna dump it on your neighbor behind you? It's gonna
No.
dump through there?
the inlets will be piped down to the main pipe, that trunk pipe that was just
And
shown.
where's that dump?
And that dumps out into the existing drainage ditch as we go past our lot.
So how many lots down? All, past all these folks?
It looks
Past
like
all
it's
these.
right here, that little corner piece.
That's just the wall.
That was going to be my question here. Any additional citizen comments? Public comment is still open, so I want to make sure we kind of keep moving a little bit, but get questions answered.
Try to go over there, or you want to see on mine, it's up to you.
That's Robert.
Here, I'll show you. Jeff, you want to see it on the computer, you got it?
Yeah, I'll just.
Was there any more citizen comments?
I think we have one additional citizen comment. Come ahead, ma'am. Yeah, that's perfect.
I just have a quick question. My name is Brenda Martinez. I'm at 1128 Waverly Place. The stairs, how would that work with water not coming down, not being an engineer, not coming down the stairs and running into the property?
Right, and to that point, if you look on this drawing right here, you see the pipe that kind of goes towards the stairs and then angles down. There's an inlet right to the right of the stairs. So any water that does happen to make it past, and let me add this, as the councilman said, if the wall is 8.5 feet tall, we have to put in 8.5 feet of gravel back that we then compact and put geogrid to basically make a big block. So any water that does happen to get past the catch basins will run through that gravel and then be piped out. But specific to Brenda's question, you can see there's an inlet right to the right of the stairs. So if there is any water that's running across the surface, it'll be caught by that inlet. Does that make sense? You want to point to?
Yeah, and it just dumps into the green space.
One thing, if we can keep we're trying to keep minutes too, so if you can just make sure we're capturing the comments in the mic.
Yeah, so the concern was any water that might make it to the steps, but if you can see on that drawing that's up, just to the right side of the steps where the pipe runs underneath the steps, there's an inlet. So we've got the inlet upstream to catch the majority of it, and we've got that one as kind of a secondary, just to make sure there's not any water getting to the steps or to that side of the wall. That'll be caught into that inlet and drop straight down in a pipe to the main trunk line that will then exit out of the other end of the wall.
Okay. All right, any additional citizen comments? All right, is there a motion to close the public comment?
Motion to close public.
Second.
Motion made by Board Member Scales, seconded by Board Member Fleschauer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Or anyone opposed? All right, seeing none, public comment is closed. I think this question's been answered, and it's the applicant that probably answered it from us. I think Board Member Fleschauer asked the question, but I was kind of thinking through, so we're piping this through the retaining wall. We're kind of somehow through that wall area. The ultimate output, where is that going? Sound like it's going to a drainage swell, another drainage swell?
Yeah, it's actually the continuation of the existing drainage swell that we have, but the wall would be built, if you can imagine a cross-section where it drops down like a V. The wall, and my proposal, or my request to have it at the property line was to be at the top of that V on our downhill neighbor's side, so that any water that fell, let's say a raindrop that falls outside the wall, would actually be already on their property. So we're not adding water to their property. So if we put the wall 2 feet in or 6 feet into that easement, it actually drops down. So now you've got a collection place where water can truly run and possibly undermine the foundation of the wall. So that was the reason, the engineering reason behind wanting to put the wall at the property line. And then was your question about where it exits. So that drainage swale, the existing drainage swale that's running all that water that Mr. Martinez was mentioning, the proposed wall would go down that drainage swale and then turn back, and then the existing pipe would exit right at where that existing drainage swale is, and we would put riprap or some kind of erosion control at that point.
In that corner where the walls meet?
Yes, sir.
And
Yep.
just, I think I
In
see where the
public-
question is going. Where the pipe is there, to the left of that, there's another house up there. There's another house up on the top. To the left of our house, where that pipe ends, is an open green space area. So right now, all the water flows down that trough into that, down a gully, which goes to a drainage area that's built off to the left. It's,
So it's dumping into the green space.
but it's not really, it's not into the green space. They actually have a concrete, they have some drainage things, that's all in there, and just that's where all that flood water goes. But does that kind of clarify where that water goes from that pipe?
I think it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and further to that point, Mr. Martinez said that there's a ton of water that runs through that drainage ditch. When we finish what we're proposing, that water flow is not going to increase any. We're not going to increase any of the water flow. It's actually going to be the same. If you look 2 feet past our wall, when the water comes out of the pipe, it's going to be the same amount of flow that was there a week ago in the big rains.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board? I think I'll have probably comments on discussion, but ready for a motion whenever you guys are.
We have the video if you guys want to see it. I have video too.
Sorry, the public hearing is closed now. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the variance to allow for the retaining wall to be located 1 inch from the rear property line and 0 from the side property line. And allow for a taller than allowable retaining wall within rear yard for properties located at 1275 Haversham and 1277 Haversham.
Okay, so
Because in
motion.
my opinion, the criteria has been met.
Okay, so motion for approval made, and that's approving the 2 variance requests. We have 2 separate ones included in that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Motion seconded by Board Member Scales. Discussion.
Share with me why,
The reason why I'm saying that we should allow them to build this wall is because I think, from what I can tell from the drawing, the engineer has addressed the water and how it's going to flow. And the flip side to that is if they don't do something, they're going to have a bigger problem than they have now. So I think, based on what I'm looking at, this is one of the few ways to address it and prayerfully take care of the problem.
during your question, you seemed to express a bit of concern about water affecting the integrity of this wall. Based on what you've reviewed in these documents, do you still have the same concern about water affecting the integrity of this wall?
I have a concern, but the piping that I see that Trent has in there, he's trying to address the water that potentially would get captured upstream and carry it down. And then the other thing is they are correct. The 8.5 to 10 feet of gravel, 8 feet deep. I mean, we're talking trucks and trucks and trucks of gravel. When that water penetrates the grass and the soil and gets into that gravel, it will go downstream. The only drawback I see there is that corner. The water will be captured in that corner and it will have to flow through what they can do is they'll put drainage tile in there that's perforated that will catch that water at that point and then carry it off as well. And I know Trent, so that's another reason why I'm thinking that this is their best approach to take care of the problem.
I think I struggle with this one. So Board of Zoning Appeals, we're looking at zoning rules and regulations. So we're looking at retaining wall variance requests. Most of what we've discussed tonight has really been drainage issues. So that's where I'm a little bit concerned, because I do feel like, presentation staff report, read through all the citizen comments. We're in a spot to where I feel like there's no good solution. Like if we do nothing, or if the homeowner does nothing, it's a bad solution. With a retaining wall, it could fail. At least you're going to be able to monitor and see the
Right,
failure.
right, and we're giving them the opportunities to solve it. If we don't, we're not.
Correct. I'm guessing the city would review retaining wall plans as well.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
they're stamped.
because of the height of the wall, they'll be required to do a retaining wall permit, and that will be reviewed by BNS and engineering.
And is there a water component to that analysis?
Shannon?
Yes, engineering would require that.
And see, with his stamp, ultimately, he's liable. If it fails, it goes back on Trent. So that's another reason why.
No pressure, right? All right, any more discussion at all? Comments? Okay. Again, I think, it's one of those tough spots. I think existing building conditions, I think a citizen mentioned this comment. There's some frustration on my part. It's like we could have sort of seen this coming a little bit, just design-wise initially, but hindsight now. All right, so we got a motion for approval and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, seeing none, the two variance requests for this item are approved. I think that carries us to the end of our agenda. I'll pause there and just make sure I haven't missed an item. All right, is there a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made, second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Everybody have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.